So today we'll begin with physical anthropology. Okay. Before I begin with physical anthropology, I need to have some personal talks with you regarding physical anthropology only. So I just want to know how many of you have a background in bio, 12th or later? Okay, very few. How many of you did not have any background, means 10th तक मतलब अगर थोड़ा बहुत पढ़ा है तो? Okay, so majority of the ones are they do not have any background of bio. Okay, so since that's a message not to अच्छा आप में से डॉक्टर्स कितने हैं? ठीक है, 4 5 6 7 8 डॉक्टर्स हैं. ओके, मतलब वो पीएचडी वाले डॉक्टर्स नहीं. ओके, so I just some basic message that I want to give you. Pehla, that many of us basically chose engineering because we hated biology. Yes, right. So, but what we are going to read here is not biology, first thing. But there is a misconception that what we are going to read will be bio. No, that's not bio. What we are going to read is genetics. And genetics is more like organic chemistry. It's less bio, more organic chemistry, or say chemistry as such. We'll be talking about certain compounds, certain chemical formulas, कुछ इस टाइप की चीजें होती हैं. वो बायो जैसा कुछ भी नहीं है वहां पे. मेरे को बोलने दो. Now, due to this, I just want to clear the misconception कि phobia है, bio है तो समझ नहीं आएगा. We actually approach this part with that. And I have seen some people doing some kind of group discussions and all, and they are saying that physical anthropology कैसे होगा, कैसे नहीं होगा, and bio वाला part है and all such kind of things. Just what I request from you is just forget each and every phobia, whatever is in your mind with respect to bio, and listen to what I speak from a fresh mind, means without having any preconceived notions, whatever it is in your mind. Just try to understand. And don't, because once you start with some preconceived notion, कुछ phobia से शुरू करते हो, तो what actually your brain automatically has convinced you 50% that you are not going to understand anything. ये रट्टा मार लेंगे. And rest of the things, if one thing comes as a doubt, you leave everything else. And that's why what actually happens, that physical anthropology sometimes becomes the weak link of the people who have chosen anthropology. Rest socio-cultural anthropology, the things get linked out, but rest physical anthropology में चीजें फिर ऐसा लगता है कि रट्टा मार लेंगे. And many of the students that come to me and say that कि physical तो रट्टा मार ही लेंगे, तो बड़ा बुरा लगता है. Now you just need to understand things, some basic. For example, just like when we started with socio-cultural anthropology, I began with theories. The first 6-7 lectures of this physical anthropology, in which I'll be talking about the basics of genetics, that's the fundamental of physical anthropology. And that's why I request everyone to pay close attention to it and try to understand each and everything. First thing. Second thing, I request a humble request to the students who basically have some prior knowledge of biology, maybe in 12th or maybe in graduation, or they are doctors, to hold their doubts. Means unnecessary doubts, either to confuse or to show one's expertise. Please avoid it right now. Okay. The thing is, we need to understand the boundary of this subject. This subject, we are not going to read biology for the sake of reading biology, or we are not going to read genetics for the sake of reading genetics. No, that's a means to understand human evolution. That's a means to understand humans. Okay, so ये एक applied aspect में हम देख रहे हैं. We will not be going much into that medical sciences and all, and that's why even me, I have that limited knowledge only that is required for anthropology per se. हो सकता है बहुत सारी चीजें doctor will ask and I might not be able to. The doctor will know more than me, and it's the limitation of my knowledge basically, because I'm reading biology for anthropology only. I'm not reading biology for medical sciences or something like that. Plus बहुत सारे ऐसे भी doubts आ जाते हैं that's unnecessary here. And हो सकता है कि most of the times when somebody asks doubts in physical anthropology specifically, I usually watch who is sitting beside that person. Now, intelligent people do understand this thing. Based on that, I would be addressing that doubt. So please, unnecessary कोई confusion create नहीं करना है. अगर आपको ये चीज पता है, and so फिर जबरदस्ती एक्सपर्टीज और डेप्थ में जाने के लिए there is no point doing that. Okay, one thing. And understand that I'll be starting from scratch. So the people who basically are having a prior knowledge of biology, they might feel that I'm going too slow. But it's okay, because I'm not teaching those people. I'm not sharing my knowledge with those people who already have that knowledge. I'll be basically dealing with those who do not have any knowledge about it, or I'll be starting from the scratch. And that's why initially 4 or 5 lectures or 6 lectures will be relatively slower, because I have to begin from the scratch. But that doesn't mean that there is nothing new for the ones who already have that knowledge of biology. बहुत सारे ऐसे चीजें हैं that you have not read biology from anthropological perspective. So there will be a lot of things, new things from the biological perspective, from the anthropological perspective, that will be important for the people who already have the biological background. Okay, so please, and one more thing, specifically for non-biology students, wherever you feel that you're not able to understand, kahin pe bhi doubt aa rahi, feel free to ask, but do not go much into the depth ki iske aage aur kya, iske aage aur kya. Just focus, or just keep your focus only on what I'm dealing in the class, because the thing is, we cannot go beyond a certain level. Already we have seen the depth of the syllabus. It's like already हम लोग अगर December end तक classes ले रहे हैं, तो there will be 125-130 lectures approximately. So that already is enough for you to cover. इससे ज़्यादा हम depth में जा भी नहीं सकते. So with this notion, or with this message, I just want to begin physical anthro. Okay. Isn't that worse? What is worse? I don't think. Genetic is the best part about biology. Okay. So, अब अपने अपने opinion है. Now, some few million years ago, there was two individuals, maybe a couple, actually, who were walking on the land of savanna grassland in Africa. Okay. Now, that was known to us maybe 100 years back. 100 साल पहले किसी ने इस बात को डिस्कवर किया. Now, how did we know that there was two individuals actually who were walking on the land or the grasslands of savanna? The story starts with a explorer who went to Tanzania, and he found that the footprints that were created by this couple actually have been sealed through a volcanic eruption. So the footprints were made on the ground, and there was a volcanic eruption, and that created a mark just like the footprint. And when these volcanic rocks were actually dated, it was found that it was few million years ago. Okay. Now, why these footprints were very important? It actually told us that few million years ago, there was somebody like us who could walk like us, who had a similar anatomy like us. And that is what created a lot of curiosity. And this was the oldest of the footprints, very similar to humans, that was found in the history. मतलब अभी तक हमें कुछ 1000 साल पुराने चीजें मिली थी, but something that was millions of years ago, that in itself created curiosity that yes, there were some species like us who had the capacity to walk on two legs. Okay. Now, this is where physical anthropology actually started to rise, or where, if I talk about the study in physical anthropology, what we are going to study, it simply is study of human beings from evolutionary framework. As simple as that. So we are trying to understand humans not as what we are right now, but a product of large scale or long time evolution that has happened for thousands of years, or say for millions of years. The product of millions of years of interaction between the biology and the environment. Okay, so biology interacted with the environment, and there was subsequent changes that happened in our biology. So that actually transformed us from a quadruped ape to a bipedal human. Now we have been using this, or we have been using this term Homo sapiens for us, okay, for ourselves. So what does this Homo sapiens actually means? So let's begin with some basic terminology. The first being species. Okay, so in any kind of biological classification, the smallest unit is the species. So a particular animal or two animals can be called to be the part of same species if they have the capacity to mate with each other. Okay, if they can mate with each other, then they are called as the species, part of the same species. So here in Homo sapiens, sapiens refers to the species. Now, multiple species, they create a genus. That means if there are multiple species who might have a very recent ancestor. A recent common ancestor, they would come under the category that is genus. For example, lion, tiger, jaguar, they all are different species, but they come under the same genus called as Panthera. Okay. Now, several genuses or genera, they create what is called as a family. Okay. For example, like these are also a too old an ancestor, means one ancestor out of which multiple families, one ancestor that creates a family, then out of which multiple genuses, and out of genuses, multiple species coming out. Okay, so multiple genuses, they will have one common ancestor, and that would create a family. Now, when I'm talking about the family in case of humans, we are part of the family called as the great apes. So it is said that maybe 8 million years ago, there was an ancestral ape who basically gave birth to two babies. One of that baby actually turned into or evolved into what we see currently as chimpanzees. And the other baby evolved in a different direction. And that evolved into what we are right now. So something that is the genus. So genus, family, then genuses, and then species. Now, talking about human as a species, right now, sapiens as a species. Do we have any other species belonging to the same genus, Homo? We do not have currently any other species belonging to the genus Homo, but we had many. And these are like Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis or Neanderthals, Homo florensis. Okay, so just note one thing. When I'm writing these names, the name of the genus should always start with a capital letter. And the name of the species should always start with a small letter. And you should always underline it. That's a common rule, or that's a rule for writing the biological name of a species or any particular. So the name of the genus should always start with a capital letter. The name of the species should always start with a small letter, and that should be underlined. Now, why it is a mandatory rule? Why it should be followed when I'm telling you? Because if you do so, it will reflect or create a good impression in the eyes of the examiner. But if you don't do so, so some people like write like this. Although it's not that big a mistake, but examiner might not feel very happy because you do not know the basic rules how to represent a particular species. And that's why I would request, just remember this, write the name of the genus with a capital letter and name of the species with the small letter. Okay. Now, the story begins when our evolution actually started, and the first feature that actually makes us distinct is our brain. And we had paid a lot for thinking or for that larger brain. So if I have to tell you some basic idea that in an average 60 kg mammal, the brain size is 200 cc, 200 cubic centimeter. But for an average 60 kg human, in the past, in our ancestors, the brain size was average 600 cc, 3 times an average mammal. And right now, for an average 60 kg human right now, the average brain size is 1200 to 1400 cc. Okay, so now you can understand the brain size that we have with respect to any other mammal. The proportionality, we have a larger size of the brain. Okay, and this brain is actually the reason, the size of the brain is actually the reason for our intelligence. The greater the size of the brain, the larger will be our intelligence. With this, does it come without any cost? Or we had to pay some cost for it? When this brain actually evolved, so as several scholars says that there is a large brain drain. Here in evolutionary sense, what does brain drain means is that brain is the largest consumer of our energy. The largest consumer of our energy. Some people might say that मैं तो use ही नहीं करता, तो मेरा energy कैसे use होगा? Actually, for them, I have the data that even when you have resting, you are doing nothing, then also your brain consumes 25% of the total energy. Okay, so the total energy that is being consumed by the body, larger chunk of it is being consumed by the brain even when we are asleep, even when we are sleeping, okay, or at rest. Now, what this led to, or what is the cost that we paid for it? We had to search or long quest for search of food. खाने की बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरत थी because our body needed large amount of carbohydrates in order to make the brain functional. And second thing, what actually happened due to this larger brain size is our muscles got atrophied. Now, what is atrophied? It simply means that thinning of our muscles. That means our muscle or muscle mass did not grow much as our brain grew, because the brain was taking larger chunk of energy, and that's why even if we are eating a large amount of food, the majority of the energy is basically used to fuel the brain, and that's why the muscle, the body, is not growing with that particular rate. Now, a chimpanzee, we can have a very good argument with chimpanzee and win over it. We can actually win over a chimpanzee, but if that argument turns violent, he basically can tear us like a rag doll. Okay, so this is what the cost we paid, that we consumed highly energetic food, but large part of it actually was going for the development of brain. But yes, we had the advantage. We could make guns, we could make cars, we could make several machines for which we are now no longer fearful of chimpanzees. We can kill all the chimpanzees with just a button, a click on a button. Okay, we have that much of power. So that is the cost that we paid during our journey towards having a larger brain. Second thing, in our journey to our evolution or becoming a Homo sapiens, what we had was walking upright. So we were standing on two legs. Okay. Now standing on two legs gave us a lot of advantage. There are several hypotheses related to bipedalism. We'll study about it. For example, when we're living in the grasslands, a animal who is on the four legs cannot see far away, cannot see the predator, cannot see the prey. But when we were able to stand on two legs, our sight actually increased. We could see the predator far away from us. We could save ourselves. We could run. And also we could see the potential prey that we could kill. Okay. So that was something that was happening when we became upright. Now becoming upright also costed us a lot. Maybe the backache, the stiff neck, or you must have heard about it, varicose veins. Okay. Now what is varicose vein? Simply speaking, when we were quadruped, जब चार पैर पे थे, so in that case, it takes less effort to transport the blood throughout the body. Now, when we are on two legs, imagine how much effort our body has to make to transport the blood from the feet to the heart, because it has to move against gravity as compared to the transportation of blood, which was actually done when we were moving on four legs. And this is when the transportation of blood does not happen properly. The blood starts accumulating in the blood vessels at feet, and that is what is called as varicose veins. Okay, so such kind of disadvantages happened because of we becoming biped, or we started moving upright. Okay, but uske kai sare advantages bhi the. The larger cost of this was actually paid by women being upright, because for becoming upright, the pelvis has to be narrow. Imagine a very broad pelvis. Then in that case, it becomes very difficult. We would have been walking like this. It would have become difficult to balance the body. Okay, imagine the broad waist, very broad waist. So in that case, walk karna, balance karna body ko on two legs becomes very difficult. But women pelvis cannot become too narrow, because they have to give birth to a baby. Their pelvis should be broad enough so that the baby's head should be able to pass through it. Now, in order to understand this, you should understand pelvis like a wash basin shaped bowl. So have you seen that wash basin? You must have seen it. So there is an upper hole like this. There is an upper hole to that wash basin which actually converges, and then there is a sink hole. Right? That is very similar to the pelvic bone. There is an upper hole, and then it converges to a very smaller hole. Okay. And it is through that smaller hole the baby's head has to pass in order to be born. And that's why the baby's head should be small enough in order to pass through the pelvis. Okay. But in this case, we were becoming intelligent when we were evolving, and the brain size was also increasing. At the same time, the baby's head should be small enough to pass through the pelvis. Okay. And the pelvis cannot become too broad, because it would create a difficulty for the woman to walk. Okay. So this was a kind of dilemma that was happening. And maybe the nature selected it in such a way that we started giving birth to immature or premature babies, because that was the only possible way for women to give birth and remain safe. Or maybe we can say that all those women who delivered premature babies could survive. And the women who could not deliver premature babies, when the baby's head grew too big, it was difficult for them to deliver, and finally they died. And this actually created some kind of changes in human pelvis. That is, it should not be too broad. That creates a difficulty in the walking, and it should not be too narrow that the baby's head should not pass through it. One another problem is that, or one another thing that happened, the brain size was actually growing. We were becoming intelligent. As I have told you, that average brain size of our ancestor was 600 cc, now which has moved to 1200 to 1400 cc. Now brain size could grow like this or like this. Okay, it could grow, the brain could expand like this horizontally or vertically. Now, nature selected the vertical expansion of brain because horizontal expansion of brain would actually increase the circumference of the head. And if it increases the circumference of the head, it becomes difficult to pass through the pelvis. Now, what actually happened because of this? The premature deliveries of the babies. The babies became too dependent on their parents. Okay, too much of dependence on the parents, and that means too much, so much so that for 15 years approximately or 10 years approximately, you can say that the baby is completely helpless. Okay, it takes around 5 to 6 years to actually be able to run properly and to develop that cognitive skills. Let's talk about other animals. The babies are able to walk on the day of the birth, and within 5-7 days, they are able to look for food. They're not dependent on parents. Okay, but it had an advantage as well. The advantage was that most of our behaviors, since we were born premature, most of our behaviors or almost all the behaviors that we have are learned behaviors. None of our behavior remained instinctual. Innate कुछ भी नहीं रहा. सब कुछ learned है because we are delivered in the premature form. Okay, and the brain growth, majority of the brain growth was happening post delivery. So the first 5 years are very critical, in which 90% of our brain growth actually happens. The 90% brain growth happens in the first 5 years after the birth. So this is how nature has very intelligently designed the process in which it supported a particular species which was a large brain, more intelligent, and which should be able to walk upright. Okay. Now, the larger brain, the intelligence definitely gave us the capabilities to make tools, technologies, a lot of other things. But what we are today, that dominant species on Earth, are we the dominant or were we the dominant? Back then, itne hi dominant the. No, for millions of years, we were the weakest species on Earth, living in the forest. Although we had the capability to make tools, although we had the capabilities to hunt the animals, we were the weakest species. And we never occupied, in say, million years back, we never occupied the top position in the food chain. It was only few thousands years ago, or say you can say 50, 60,000 years ago, that we actually occupied the top position in the food chain, or at max 1 lakh years ago. For the millions of years, say from 8 millions to say 1 lakh years back, we basically were somewhere in the middle position. We were hunting some animals, but we were also hunted by several animals. We were being killed by a lot of people. Okay. A lot of animals. What actually made us the dominant one? Actually, we realized, or nature actually favored those. We realized that अकेले survive करना बहुत difficult. We are nothing when we are alone. But when we are in the group, when we are collective, we can beat anyone with any kind of force. Okay. And that's why nature might have favored those who had a greater capability to form social bonds, who had the greater capability to live in the groups. And that is how the social group became one of the most important part of our life, living in the groups. Humans hardly are found alone. You can find an isolated animal, you can find but isolated human living alone? No, not possible at all. Isolated groups are there, but not human. Okay, it's that group living only, the social living only, that gave us that capacity that we could beat any animal despite being weaker, much weaker in terms of physical strength. We cannot beat a chimpanzee, we cannot beat even a deer. आप नहीं पकड़ सकते अकेले. Okay, it might be luck, sheer luck. Once you can be lucky, twice you can be lucky, but you cannot be lucky for all the days in the year, and you can have food every day by hunting the same animal. It's not possible. So what actually made us that, what actually favored our luck was the social group that we were a part of. Okay. And that's why this social groupings started becoming an important aspect of human life. Okay. Now, third thing that happened, fire. Discovery of fire. ऐसा नहीं है कि फायर को हमने इन्वेंट किया. We must have seen fire, but just like other animals, we run away from fire. We would have run away from fire, just like you show fire to some animal, they run away. It took us millions of years to understand the process of generation of fire. And if the hypothesis has to be believed, it was when we started hitting one stone with the other, we started creating sparks, and that would have made us aware about how to generate fire. But पहली बार ऐसा भी नहीं हुआ होगा. वो फायर को हम देख के डर जाते हैं. Okay, it took us thousands of years to develop fire and to control it. But once we did so, one very beautiful thing happened, that we now have a friend which is loyal and obedient to us and has an infinite amount of energy that can be given to us. Fire. Okay. Now, this actually played a very important role in our evolution. And that what role is? So with fire, we started to cook food, or the food became softer. And when we had softer food, we had to chew less. Okay. And that's why the teeth started to become smaller. Smaller teeth. We do not need thick, broad teeth, or we do not need sharp canine to tear the meat, because the food is now soft. And on an average, the ancestral humans, specifically after Homo erectus, it was assumed that it chews only for 1 hour a day. Total food that we eat, we chew only 1 hour a day. Compared to a chimpanzee that spends approximately 5 to 6 hours a day to chew the food. अब आप सोचो इसका क्या एडवांटेज हो रहा है कि chewing also requires a lot of energy. Now we are not spending that much of energy in chewing the food. Now that energy is basically being transferred to the brain growth. Also, when the food became softer, it was easy to digest. And since it was easy to digest, our intestines became smaller. The intestine relatively became smaller. And after brain, it's the intestine that was one of the most energy draining organ. सबसे ज़्यादा energy drain brain करता है, and then it is the intestine. And intestine, when it became smaller, it started to consume less amount of energy. Now that extra energy that we are getting after consuming the food will again be going to the brain, and a brain growth will happen. So this fire actually shaped our evolution. Now, it not just shaped our biology, it actually prevented some kind of biological changes as well. So we originated in Africa. That was an equatorial region, always having warm climate, no extreme climate, warm climate. Now, but we started to migrate outside Africa, moving to Europe, where there are ice ages, okay, where there was a very cold climate. But if we had evolved as per the whims of the nature, the people who would have evolved, went to Europe, they definitely would have developed some kind of biological solution to extreme cold. Just like the polar animals you see. The polar animals have large amount of subcutaneous fat. Subcutaneous means fat under the skin. Okay, but we didn't have it. The people of Europe, the people living in Arctic, do not have that kind of subcutaneous fat. They are not different from people living in, say, the warmer areas. Why? Because we had another source to keep us warm, fire. Else, in absence of fire, the people of Europe would have developed different kinds of capacities to keep their body warm, the biological solution. But fire gave us the power to prevent any kind of biological evolution or biological changes to keep our body warm. And this is what fire actually did to us or gave to us. Plus, when we had this fire, So we could scare away any animal. We could protect ourselves. We could actually hunt in the dark. Now the time of our activity actually increased significantly. Now, इससे पहले, in absence of fire or in absence of time when we used to control fire, here the activity was reduced during the daylight. We could work just like other animals in the daylight only, because we have to go back to a place where we will stay at the night. We have to protect ourselves, and only time that is available was the daylight. Now, इससे हमारी बहुत सारी अभी physical behaviors or attitudes are associated. For example, if you get up at 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. any day, you'll feel very bad throughout the day. You will have a very bad mood every day for that particular day. Why is it so? It's because of our muscle memory that has been created after millions of years living in the forest. If we get up late any day, we would have to sleep bare stomach. Then, because the daylight would have been limited, we would not have been able to hunt. And that bare stomach kind of might have created some kind of uneasiness. And that has been recorded in our genes. And that is why whenever we get up late, maybe after 12 or 1 in the afternoon, our body starts secreting that kind of stress hormones. We feel very bad. We feel that our mood is not so good. Okay, despite having a very good sleep, if you get up at 1 p.m., you will never feel good immediately. It will take some time to get out of that bad mood. Okay, this is because of the evolutionary memory or the gene memory that has been created for living in the forest for hundreds of years, or sorry, for millions of years. And this is the role of fire that actually shaped or actually gave direction to our evolutionary journey. So what we are seeing here, that the evolutionary journey is a mix of the biology changes plus the changes that were actually determined by the culture, fire being a cultural innovation. And that's why what physical anthropology will do is study human in a biocultural, with a biocultural approach or biocultural framework. So we will never understand human as a biological organism, because the culture has also played a very important role in shaping this biology. Okay, and that's why biocultural approach is the foundation of physical anthropology. Now, all this happening, what happened with humans as we started to evolve with fire, with more intelligence? Actually, after this much of intelligence, after this much of ability to make tools and all, we still were very much fearful. Okay, and जैसे जैसे मतलब बहुत टाइम तक हम मिडिल लेवल पे रहे फूड चेन के, it took us a lot of time to reach at the top of the food chain, but that fear was still very much ingrained in us. And that fear, and plus coming to the position of a species that is at the top of the food level, actually made us what Yuval Noah Harari says as a banana republic dictator. Okay, now banana republic dictator means that a person or an individual who has immense power but do not have any sense to use it. Okay, we had that immense power, we have that immense power, but wo jo dar tha made us very cruel, made us very ruthless, because we have been living in fear for millions of years in the forest. And अचानक से क्या हुआ, हमारे पास बहुत सारा पावर आ गया, and वो डर भी था और पावर भी है. So immediately we have a tendency to immediately eliminate any kind of threat that we have. And most of the wars that we are fighting or we have fought is because of this instinct of fear, along with the deadly power that we have. Any kind of threat, immediately eliminate karo. Okay, and it might have a lot of repercussions, but doesn't matter. Okay, it is not something that happens with other animals, because other animals who are at the top of the food chains like lion, tigers and all, they have developed this feature very gradually, and the ecosystem has also adapted itself accordingly. For example, if the lion was becoming more powerful or tiger was becoming more powerful, the deers were also able to run faster. The hyenas were able to cooperate more. And that's why there was always a check and balance that was imposed by the nature. That if the predator is becoming powerful, the prey will also develop some kind of defense mechanisms, some better defense mechanism. But with humans, it happened all of a sudden. And in such case, the nature could not create a mechanism which could check the wrath of humans. Okay, with fear and that much of power, we became one of the most ruthless species on Earth. Okay, and this is the overall journey that we are going to cover in physical anthropology. Okay, so with the approach that physical anthropology will be studying humans from evolutionary framework, and the foundation of which will be the biocultural approach. Here, the biocultural simply means that you cannot, in case of humans, you cannot dissociate biology from culture. They are two sides of the same coin. Biology has impacted culture. That means intelligence. That is, the brain size grew, we became intelligent. And with this intelligence, what we did? We developed culture, like tools, fire, and various other things. And now these tools, fire, and all, again, impacted our biology. So there was a kind of feedback loop between culture and biology. That culture was impacting the biology, and biology in turn impacts the culture. That is, it's our biology only that we have been predisposed to make culture. We have the features. For example, the biology of having an opposable thumb. Now, this opposable thumb gave us the capacity to grip any object. Okay, else it would have been difficult to grab any object. And when we had this biological capacity, then only we were able to make tools. Or walking upright. When we started walking upright, this hands became free for manipulation of the objects. Else, we would have been using these hands for locomotion only, just like other animals. Now, when we have hands to manipulate the objects along with that opposable thumb, we were able to make tools. We were able to make various elements of culture. So we were predisposed, or we were designed, our body was designed in such a way that we were able to make culture. And when we created culture, it also impacted our biology in a way, in a lot more ways. For example, the case of fire that we talked about, the size of the teeth, the size of the intestine, and various other changes that happened because of culture. Okay, or if we talk about the diseases that happens, the immune system that we have developed, that's again the result of our culture, specifically agriculture. COVID ke baad, have we evolved? Yes, we have evolved. Now we have those antibodies that are able to fight a new microorganism. That evolution has happened. And what's responsible for this evolution, that biological change? Our culture, our dietary practice that actually created, or that actually made us in contact with a new virus, and our biology evolved to fight that new microorganism. And we are actually coming across several pandemics, or we have come across, we will actually come across, and our biology will actually evolve here and there. Now, the basis of which is the culture. And that's why I'm saying that there is a feedback loop that happens, or that is actually playing between biology and culture. And this is what biocultural framework will be in anthropology, physical anthropology. And this was the 10-marker question. The biocultural framework forms the foundation of physical anthropology. Okay. In other aspects, say the human evolution, we have seen like biocultural approach. In terms of disease, एक बहुत interesting case है that we started agriculture. We moved from hunting gathering to agriculture, and for agriculture, what actually happened? We had to cut the forest, and cutting the forest, bringing more land into cultivation. And bringing more land into cultivation, what actually happened? Those insects which were then breeding on the blood of the wild animals, we became their host. New diseases came up, like malaria and all. Then we started working on soil, new microorganisms coming to us through soil. Then we started domesticating the animals. Several new microorganisms which were residing on the body of that animal, we came in contact with that. TB, basically said to have been passed to us from cow. Or then what happened? We had surplus. Surplus will be stored somewhere. And wherever you store grains, it invites rodents. And these rodents bring what is called as plague. So, wo bimari aayi. Then, living sedentary lifestyle, we required a nearby source of water. We started digging the pits and storing the water. And now that stagnant water is the best breeding ground for the insects. So we started developing several waterborne diseases, cholera, typhoid, and all those diseases. And everything was actually confined to a particular region only. But when we had that surplus had to be traded. इसी से तो exchange करोगे. And when we were actually trading that surplus, what actually happened? We were passing the grains along with the microorganisms. And the diseases started to spread. And the spread of the disease actually increased significantly with globalization. The microorganisms which were confined to one particular region actually started to spread all over the world. And the best example of this is the COVID. It took only few days to spread to all of the world, the pandemic. Okay, the entire world experienced a lockdown for a particular virus that was discovered for the very first time in November in China. And by March, everything was shut down. So what we have created the global network for trade, for goods, for ideas, for humans. At the same time, we have also created super highways for microorganisms to travel across the world. The super highways. Okay, and it hardly takes few days, maybe a month, for any microorganism. So abhi aap dekhoge har saal aisa hota hai that there will be some virus discovered in Africa, Nipah cases, Ebola cases, or West Nile virus, and immediately there will be a shutdown for all the flights that are coming from Africa to India, or there will be a surveillance for all the flights from which are coming from these countries. Har saal ye case hoga that some West Nile cases or Ebola cases or Nipah virus cases will be discovered in Africa, and immediately the shutdown will be there. Now, the people who got exposed to these kind of viruses, they are more evolved, and these are because of our cultural activities only. So you can understand that how agriculture created several communicable diseases, made it more prevalent in a particular population. Okay, now culture has played a very important role. एक और problem आई agriculture से. Initially, when we were hunter-gatherers, we were eating all the kinds of foods, meat, fruits, nuts, seeds. So macronutrients were balanced, isn't it? But when we shifted towards agriculture, for the very first time, we discovered the concept of staple food. Maize, rice, wheat, potato, something that is cultivated at a large scale and will be consumed almost throughout the year, or will make a big part of our diet. And that is for the first time we actually discovered the nutrient diseases, all malnourishment. So diabetes है, या protein deficiency है, या फिर basically micronutrient deficiencies है, zinc deficiency, calcium deficiency, iron deficiencies, because the variety that was present in our diet actually gone. Plus the culture that actually when we were hunter-gatherers, we were doing a lot of physical activity, moving in the forest for long distance. But with agriculture, sedentary life, the physical activity reduced significantly. And when it reduced significantly, obesity became one of the biggest problems. Now, these are some of the things that are the result of our culture. And that's why it is said that there is a feedback loop that actually connects the biology of the humans along with the culture, and none of them can be understood in isolation. The culture is possible only because we have some kind of physical features that give us the capability to have culture, like opposable thumb, some intelligent brain, physical features like bipedalism and all that kind. We are predisposed to learn culture. At the same time, this culture also has played a very important role in shaping our biology. So this is the biocultural approach, which is related to physical anthropology. And whenever you are supposed to write the answer in physical anthropology, I'm emphasizing on it that never ever go too much biological, because you will actually lose the essence of physical anthropology. अगर आप डॉक्टर हो, आपको बहुत सारे डिटेल पता है, don't ever go too much biological in the answer. Always keep your answer biocultural. That will always get you an extra mark, because it's not only the biology, but studying the human biology from biocultural approach. Okay, and that will always be appreciated in the exam. Okay, so just write this: biological anthropology or physical anthropology. Physical anthropology is the study of human, within framework of evolution, with an emphasis on interaction between biology and culture. Interaction between biology and culture. It deals with adaptation. It deals with adaptation, variability, and evolution of human beings, and their living and fossils relatives. Evolution of human beings and their living and fossil relatives. Write the heading: biocultural approach, the hallmark of biological anthro. Biocultural approach, the hallmark of biological anthro. Right? The most characteristic feature of our species behavior, the most characteristic feature of our species behavior is culture. The cultural behavior is not programmed in our genes, Human culture is learned. We have a biological potential. For cultural behavior in general. Comma. But exactly how we behave comes to us through our experiences. Through our experiences. Okay, next point. The dichotomy between biology and cultural influences. The dichotomy between biology and cultural influences on humankind is false. On humankind is false. They are not separate entities. They are not separate entities. That is biology and culture. They are not separate entities, but two sides of the same coin. But two sides of the same coin. They are constantly interacting. They are constantly interacting and influencing each other. Constantly interacting and influencing each other in a dynamic feedback loop. In a dynamic feedback loop. Next point. The biocultural approach has been used to study a wide range of topics, which includes first, human evolution. Second, human variations. Third, human adaptations. Fourth, nutrition and health. Fifth, reproduction and fertility. Okay. Now, let's see the history of this discipline. This physical anthropology, as the term we use, actually was the oldest of the term that was created. Okay, studying the humans from the biological aspects or from the physical aspects. Okay, that was and the major purpose of this physical anthropology was to study human evolution and to study human variations. And the tools or the methodology that it accepted or it adopted was the morphological studies of present human and of the fossils. यही use करते हैं. Morphological means, morph means form, and outward appearance. So we were studying the outward appearance of the skeletons of the fossils, and we were also studying the outward appearance of the current living beings, just to understand human evolution or human variation. So for example, if you remember when we talked about Risley, caste and race, so he was talking about the broad nose, the dark skin color, the skeleton, the stature, and all such kind of things. Okay, so we use that outward appearances to actually classify the humans into different races. That is the study of variation. And second, we started studying the evolution by outward appearances of fossils. Gradually, what actually happened? Genetics was rediscovered, or genetics became one of the very, a type of viral topic tha, that was, which started with rediscovery of Mendel laws in somewhere in 1900. Okay, and that became an integral part of physical anthropology. what is genetics. And thereby, there was a scholar, S.L. Washburn. He coined the term new physical anthropology. He says that this new physical anthropology, or he actually started a movement that is new physical anthropology. Here, new physical anthropology would not be studying humans only from this morphological features, but from the genetic aspects as well, and also inculcating the biocultural aspects as well. Okay, सिर्फ biological study नहीं होगी, but biocultural होगी, and that too by taking into the insights from genetics. धीरे धीरे what happened? Anthropology started taking insights from other disciplines as well, and several sub-disciplines started to contribute to our understanding of humans, their evolution and their variation. Okay, and several sub-branches of physical anthropology started to develop. For example, paleoanthropology. That was specialization in study of fossils, human fossils. Or say paleopathology. Paleo means old and pathology means study of disease. So that is a study of disease of ancient fossils or hominins. Or paleoarchaeology, or say archaeology. So trying to develop the culture of the past from the ancient remains, archaeology. And molecular anthropology. So studying the humans from their molecular elements like DNA, RNA, several proteins, and all such kind of things. Osteology, study of bones. So we started. So इस तरीके से we were on one particular branch of osteology, paleoosteology. So we were studying the bones of the past fossils. And इससे बहुत सारी चीजें हमें पता चलने लगी. For example, like paleoosteology, when we studied the bones of the past, we were able to identify several diseases. अब diseases से हमें क्या पता चला कि शायद dietary change आया, जिसकी वजह से bones में कुछ diseases हैं, maybe calcium deficiencies. Or if you find the fossils in one place, one of the fossil is having lower bone density as compared to the other. Okay, you can definitely say that there is unequal distribution of resources. Somebody was having less amount of nutrient, less amount of calcium in his food, and the other was having enough. So there was unequal distribution of resources. Now, one of the example of this is that we found a fossil in Shanidar cave, Iraq. And it was found that the fossils was given a burial, decent burial, but the bone of that fossil was diseased. मतलब वो उसको कुछ ना कुछ प्रॉब्लम थी, वो चल नहीं पाया होगा. इससे क्या पता चला कि शायद सोशल लाइफ बहुत बढ़िया रही होगी. That despite not able to walk, not able, or despite being physically disabled, this person lived up to the age of 30 plus years. That was a big time for that period, and was taken care by his fellow individuals. तभी तो मतलब सोसाइटी प्रॉपर डेवलप हुई होगी, लोग अपनी जिम्मेदारी समझते होंगे, and such kind of things. So this is what new physical anthropology, or this is the term what S.L. Washburn says that should be called as new physical anthropology. But that was somewhere in 1950s. Now what he was referring to new is something that has become an integral part of anthropology right now. And that's why the term physical anthropology is not used. Neither we use the term new physical anthropology. Rather we use the term biological anthropology. Okay, जो अभी contemporary utilization में term है, that is biological anthropology. Why I'm talking about this S.L. Washburn new physical anthropology? दो reason है. एक बार तो 10 mark पूछा हुआ है new physical anthropology, and second is like some people might be appearing for BPSC and all. तो वहाँ पे this kind of objective questions can come. S.L. Washburn, the term new physical anthropology was given by this person. Okay, so that's why just write this physical anthropology and its history. Originally, physical anthropology is the study of human evolution. and variation through morphology. Through morphology. Later, it started to incorporate the concepts from different disciplines. S.L. Washburn in a paper titled The New Physical Anthropology. Argued that the study of human evolution and variation should not be limited to study of fossils and bones. Instead, he proposed a more holistic approach. That would integrate study of anatomy along with genetics, culture, and other disciplines. It was a transition from the study based on measurement and classification. Towards process and mechanism of evolutionary changes. It tried to link forms of evolution with environment to reconstruct evolutionary journey of our ancestors. Next point, Washburn's approach was based on recognition that the humans are not simply biological organisms, comma, but also cultural beings. Today, anthropologists use a variety of methods. To study human evolution and variations. Such as first, paleoanthropology, the study of fossil humans, Paleoanthropology, the study of fossil humans. Second, primatology, the study of non-human primates. Third, genetics, the fundamental basis of inheritance. Then osteology, that is the study of bones. And last, paleopathology, the study of diseases in ancient population. Okay. Now, this is some basic overview of what we are going to study in anthropology. We will be talking about evolution. We will be trying to understand it from the biocultural perspective. We will try to get a genetic overview of it. Okay, that is what we are going to see. Now, let's begin with the basics of genetics. From where we'll start is the cell, the basic unit of human life. Okay. So, when I talk about cell, I'll be talking about in the cells that are present in the living species that are of two types. The first one, prokaryotic, and second, eukaryotic. Now, the word prokaryotic or prokaryotes actually is created out of two words. First one, pro, that is proto, and karyotes, that means nucleus. Okay, so protokaryotes means the cell that used to exist before the nucleus was formed. So these are those cells in which there is no well-defined cell nucleus. That's why the name protokaryotes, the older than the development of nucleus. So these were the first form of life that were present on Earth 3.7 billion years ago. This kinds of cell started to develop on Earth. Okay, and then comes eukaryotes. Eu means true or well-defined, and karyotes means nucleus. So those cells which have well-defined nucleus. Okay. Now this eukaryotes, they are more developed form of cells having well-defined nucleus, and the first eukaryote would have developed approximately 1.2 billion years ago. The eukaryotes. So life started on Earth maybe 3.7 billion years ago, and then finally it was in the form of prokaryotes. And then later on, the well-defined cells started to develop, that is the eukaryotes having well-defined nucleus. So animal cell or plant cells are eukaryotic in nature. And example of this prokaryotes, for example, bacteria or amoeba. So these are prokaryotes. So coming back to eukaryotes, that is where the human cells actually lie. Now talking about human cells, in human body, the cells are of two types in everybody body. So one cell is called as the somatic cell, and the second one is called as germ cell or sex cell. Okay. So somatic cells are all the body cells in your body which has 23 pairs of chromosomes. All the cells in your body that has 23 pairs of chromosomes are called as somatic cells. So every normal cell in your body, say any part of the body, is somatic cell. Okay. And due to this pairing of chromosome, these are also called as diploid. I'm just introducing some kind of terminology which we'll be using very frequently in physical anthropology. So just get used to it. Diploid. Di means two and ploid means set. So two set of chromosomes, diploid. So in somatic cell, there will be 23 pairs of chromosomes. Okay. Then there is a germ cell or sex cell. Here, there are only 23 chromosomes, not pairs, but only 23 chromosomes. So we have two types of sex cells, sperm and ova. That is the egg cell. So sperm, the sex cell of male, and ova, the egg cell or sex cell of the female. And they do not have any pairs of chromosome, but chromosome in singularity. 23 chromosome, not the pair. And that's why they are also called as haploid. Diploid means di means two set of chromosome. Haploid means half of the set. Okay, half the set, half of the ploid. So 23 chromosomes. Clear here? So any cell of the body, say hair cell, skin cell, lungs, liver, tissues, any kind of cell, that will be a somatic cell only because it has 23 pairs of chromosomes. But cells such as sperm and ova, they are the germ cell or sex cells that is having only 23 chromosome, or they are haploid in nature. So remember this term diploid and haploid. Now, some cell organelles. So cell organelles means the small organelles that are present in the cell. So small functioning machines that are present in the cell that makes the cell functional. Okay. So we'll see not every cell organelle that is important for us. Some very important cell organelles right now, which is important for us, which we'll be using multiple times. The first, nucleus. So it's the most densely packed cell organelle. And in this nucleus, what we have is the most important thing that actually decodes, or that's the storage of our identity. What we have is the genetic material called as the DNA. And this is called as the nuclear DNA. तो सबसे ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है यहाँ पे न्यूक्लियस में that we have the DNA, the genetic material in which our identity is stored. The second one is mitochondria. So mitochondria, you must have read, it's the powerhouse of the cell. Basically, the work of this organelle is to perform some kind of metabolic activities. Metabolism hai. But what we are reading mitochondria is not for that organelle function, but what we are reading mitochondria is a DNA that is present in mitochondria. Okay, and that is mitochondrial DNA. It relatively is very short as compared to nuclear DNA. So it is said that an average cell, जितने डीएनए एक न्यूक्लियस में होते हैं, तो एक सेल का जो न्यूक्लियस है उसका जो डीएनए का लेंथ होगा सारे डीएनए कंबाइन विल बी अप्रोक्सीमेटली 6 feet, and we almost have 10 trillion cells in our body, and in such case the length that the DNA would make would definitely be enough to create a thread that would circumference the earth. हमारी इतनी बड़ी बॉडी में इतना ज्यादा डीएनए है दैट अगर उसको एक थ्रेड बनाया जाए तो प्रॉपर अर्थ को सर्कमफरेंस करते. ओके, दैट इज द लेंथ ऑफ आवर डीएनए दैट वी हैव. सो वेरी स्मॉल थ्रेड्स like structure that are present in the nucleus of the cell, and multiple billions of cells are present in our body, and that's why this DNA actually holds a lot of information about heredity. It holds a lots of information that we will be passing on from one generation to another, or it does not hold the information that we will be passing on. It also holds the information for our past also. बहुत सारी चीजें जो हमारे साथ पास्ट में हुई है हमारी एवोल्यूशनरी हिस्ट्री में, that's also recorded in our DNA. Okay, and second, mitochondrial DNA becomes very special because that also plays a very important role, because we inherit that DNA from mother. So all inherit their mitochondrial DNA from their respective mothers. Okay, now why is it that important? Mitochondrial DNA बहुत ज्यादा stable है. It does not changes with time, or does not changes with that speed with time. Now imagine I have, or a girl has a DNA of her mother. She had the mitochondrial DNA of her mother, and so on and so forth. We create that chain. Can we reach to the person from where everybody might have inherited the DNA? Are you getting this? So we are creating the chain. A girl has inherited the mitochondrial DNA from her mother, she from her own mother, and then creating that chain, we actually came to a conclusion that there was mitochondrial Eve, Adam and Eve, the first human. So we have created that concept of mitochondrial Eve, that there were initially 7 women on earth, and these 7 women are the mothers of all the population that currently lies on earth. सबके सब उन 7 women से ही उतरे आए हैं, because we believe that there might have been originally 7 different types of mitochondrial DNA. It has been based on some kind of genetic research. We'll just talk about it. But for that, you definitely need to understand that this mitochondrial DNA is relatively stable and basically is passed from mother to her children. Okay. And इससे बहुत अच्छा एक idea और भी है. Have you heard about this Saptarishi? And what Hindu philosophy says about Saptarishi? All the humans, they have originated from this Saptarishis. हमारे जो गोत्र के जो head हैं, they are one of the Saptarishis, isn't it? So do Hindu philosophy or Hindu literature knew about this mitochondrial Eve, the 7 ancestors from whom the entire humankind have originated, the 7 gotra heads. And that has been a research that has been proven that Rebecca Sykes actually has talked about this mitochondrial Eve का concept, and जिससे ये बताया गया कि 7 women थी जहां से सारे के सारे humankind have originated, and maybe Saptarishi. Okay, so there are a lot of similarity about what science is discovering right now. It might be merely a coincidence, or what has been talked about in our mythological or so-called mythological literature. Okay, there might be a coincidence, or maybe they were that much intelligent, they were aware about these kind of facts. Long back, we actually discovered it through our genetic research. Okay, so mitochondria and mitochondrial DNA, that's a very important organelle. Then comes Ribosomes. So now ribosomes are those organelles which are very much important for protein synthesis in our body. So that protein synthesis, don't take that protein as whey protein wala jo hum log ke dimag mein, gym wala powder protein. Anything that is happening in our body is basically because of proteins, some chemicals which are polypeptide chains of amino acids. मतलब बहुत सारे amino acids हैं, in total 20 amino acids. They basically are connected together to create a protein. Approximately 200 amino acids का जो collection है, that is what is called as a protein, polypeptide chain of amino acids. Now these proteins, they play a very important role. So if our brain has to give instruction to any part of the body to function in a certain manner, everything is happening through the proteins. The brain will be releasing some kind of proteins, and that protein will be received by the receiver proteins, and then the following organ of the body behaves in a particular manner. So the communication that is happening, the coordination that is happening, everything is basically based on some kind of proteins. The digestion, any kind of activity. So multiple types of proteins, they are being produced in our body, or we might be consuming it through some food, and these proteins play a very important role in the normal functioning of the body. So those proteins that are created in the body, these will be created by ribosomes. Okay, so we'll be talking about it. So these are the three cell organelles that we should be very much aware about: the nucleus of the cell, that is, which is having, or it is a storehouse of the DNA, then mitochondria, which has the mitochondrial DNA which we inherit from our mother, then the ribosomes, which is responsible for protein synthesis. Okay, now let's begin with the fundamental of genetics, that is DNA. Okay. So genetics, fundamentals of genetics, actually is based on central dogma, a basic fundamental underlying principle that actually controls, or that is valid throughout the genetics. The central dogma is that DNA creates RNA, which creates protein. This is called as the central dogma of human genetics, or the fundamental idea of human genetics. ठीक है? DNA to RNA to protein. Okay. Now let's talk about the genetic material, that is DNA and RNA. So these are the fundamental genetic material that is present in human body, that is actually the storage of our identity. Now, if I have to define DNA, it simply is a biochemical molecule which is double-stranded, arranged in helix form, and the strands are opposite to each other. Double-stranded, helical arrangement, and strands are opposites to each other. So simply, if I have to draw this, this is the DNA. Okay. and RNA is a single-stranded molecule. And single strand like this. Okay, so just to, this is the difference between DNA and the RNA. Okay, a double-stranded helically arranged strands. Okay, and second one, the RNA, the single-stranded molecule present in the human nucleus. Okay, or the more scientific version of it, the DNA and the RNA. Okay, now let's see what DNA is made up of. So DNA is composed of sugar molecule, and these sugar molecules are connected to each other by phosphate bonds. Okay. So there are two strands. So two strands, sugar molecules connected to each other by phosphate bonds. Now with every sugar molecule is attached a nitrogenous base. Now this nitrogenous base, they are of two types, purine and pyrimidine. Okay, two types of nitrogenous bases, purine and pyrimidine. Purine basically is of two types, adenine and guanine, while pyrimidine is of three types, cytosine, uracil and thymine. The purine, adenine, guanine, and then pyrimidine, cytosine, uracil and thymine. So you can remember, cut the pyramid. Okay, just remember this and you will be able to remember it. So CUT comes under pyrimidine, cut the pyramid, and rest all will be under purine. Now, there is a specific relationship between purine and pyrimidine, that A, that is adenine, will always form a bond with thymine. And guanine will always form a bond with cytosine. So A will always form a bond opposite to thymine, AT, and G will always form a bond with cytosine. Okay, so ATGC. Now coming back, कहाँ पे आपको डाउट है? इस DNA में तीन मेजर कंपोनेंट्स होते हैं. One is the sugar molecule, this, then phosphate bond, and then third one, that is the nitrogenous bases, which is of two types, purine and pyrimidine. Purine दो टाइप के होते हैं, adenine and guanine, and pyrimidine is of three types, cytosine, uracil and thymine. Okay, now one special feature is that adenine will always form bond with thymine and guanine will always form a bond with cytosine. Okay, now if I have to draw this, DNA molecule, there are two strands And with every sugar molecule, there will be one phosphate bond, and second, there will be a nitrogenous base that will be attached to it. So suppose if there is adenine here, and this sugar molecule has to join this with this sugar molecule, what should be present here? Thymine, right? And in the same way, if there is guanine here, what should be present here? Cytosine. And just like this, the bonds or the strands, they basically get connected to each other. They are joined together. So if there is adenine here, what will be the case? Thymine. If there is cytosine here, guanine. Okay. So अगर आप DNA molecule को देखो, so what you are seeing that the overall skeleton is same, sugar connected by phosphate bond. What actually is varying? The presence of adenine, guanine, thymine, cytosine, क्या है वहां पे? So the sequence of this adenine, guanine, thymine, cytosine present in a DNA molecule actually creates your DNA identity, because rest of the things, that is sugar with phosphate bond, is the same throughout the DNA. What actually is varying is the presence of thymine, adenine, guanine, cytosine. These nitrogenous base pair and the sequence of it will be determining your genetic identity. And आपको दोनों strand को लिखने की भी जरूरत नहीं है. You don't need to write both the strands, because if you know the formula of one strand, you can automatically guess what will be the sequence of nitrogenous bases that will be present in the second strand. So if you find any particular DNA representation, कहीं पे भी आप genetics वगैरह में देखोगे, so it is written simply the code of one particular DNA strand, the sequence of the nitrogenous bases that is present in one strand of the DNA, because second strand can automatically be understood. कि अगर एक side में A है, तो the second side will definitely be T, or if एक side में G है, the other side will definitely be C. So we can just write the sequence of a DNA like this. Now we all have a unique DNA sequence. We all have it, a different DNA sequence. And what is different in our DNAs is the sequence of this nitrogenous bases. These nitrogenous bases are different in our DNA, and that gives us a unique identity, unique physical features, unique facial features, and a unique genetic identity. Okay? इससे beyond भी बहुत कुछ है DNA में. I will be talking about it in few lectures. But for the time being, you need to understand that this is how the DNA is constructed. Sugar molecules connected by phosphate bond, and then the two strands of the sugar molecules actually being joined by the nitrogenous bases. And that nitrogenous bases are the ones that actually forms the identity of the DNA strand. Now, we need to go into a little bit deeper just to understand the process of DNA replication. Means DNA अपनी copy कैसे create करता है, इसके लिए थोड़ा सा और जानने की जरूरत है. We do not need to remember the formula, but you need to understand something. So if you see the sugar molecule, of the DNA, so it's something like this. Okay, so the carbons are numbered 1 to 5. Now at the 5th carbon is basically the phosphate bond will be attached. Okay, and now this phosphate bond will attach to the 4th carbon of the next sugar molecule. Sorry. So if I have to construct the other strand, okay. So these are the sugar molecules which are joined by the phosphate bonds. Okay. Now if you see this, one side of this chain, मान लो ये chain यहाँ से शुरू हो रही है, so which carbon atom is free? It is called as the 3' end of the chain. And if you go to end of this chain, बीच में जितने मर्जी हो, end में ये 5 वाला atom free होगा. So this is called as the 5' end of the chain, and this chain will be called as 3', 5' chain. Okay, the third carbon atom is free, and the fifth, so 3', 5' chain. Now, if you see this chain, so इसके एक end पे कौन सा carbon free है? Fifth one, and the other end, the third one. So that's why this chain will be called as 5' to 3' chain. Now you can understand why they are oppositely arranged. So 3', 5' will actually be arranged with respect to 5', 3' chain. ये जानना इसलिए जरूरी है. You do not have to draw this, exam में कभी नहीं पूछा जाएगा and all such kind of thing. But it's necessary to understand the process of replication. Okay, 3', 5' and 5', 3' chain. ये clear है? Sorry? अरे आप 3 और 5 में आप देखो. अभी I cannot go for that organic chemistry वाला part की 2 क्यों नहीं है. But फिलहाल you can understand that एक साइड में 3 free है, एक साइड में 5 free है, और दूसरे वाले में एक साइड में 5 और दूसरे में 3. And that's why 3', 5' chain is actually in alignment with the opposite chain, that is 5', 3' chain. ये 3', 5' है, ये वाली chain यहाँ से देखा, और ये 5', 3' है. They are arranged in opposition to each other, right? And that's why it is called as helical strands arranged opposite to each other. Two strands, two threads arranged opposite to each other. Now, why this become helical? Means why not the DNA is like this? Why a coiled form? Now the answer lies in the nitrogenous bases. So for example, if there is a nitrogenous base A here, okay, so there will be another nitrogenous base T that will be joined. Now, if there is a nitrogenous base G here, there will be a nitrogenous base C that will be joined. Then again, any random कुछ भी आप लिख लो यहाँ पे. Now, if you are seeing that AT में double bond है, means the not double bond as such, but just to show the intensity of the strength with which they are bound to each other. एक case में they are attracting each other with less force. In other case, they are attracting each other with relatively more force. So दो threads हैं, they are connected to each other. कुछ जगह पे inner pull ज़्यादा है, कुछ जगह पे inner pull कम है. So what actually will happen? It will coil down. Because if the force is uniform, they can remain in the straight line. But if the force is uneven throughout the thread, then it will coil down. And that's the reason, because of the uneven force throughout the thread, due to attraction of the nitrogenous bases, it coils down. Okay, and that creates the structure of the DNA. Although ये बनाना बहुत आसान है, but exam में कभी पूछा नहीं गया आपसे DNA and all that stuff. You don't need to remember the formula. You just can remember the DNA structure. This. So sugar molecules joined by phosphates, and then these sugar molecules, this chain is basically joined by the nitrogenous bases A, T, G, and C that is present in the DNA. Okay. Now that we have understood the structure of the DNA, that is simply speaking like this. So it simply shows that these threads are joined together by the bonds between the nitrogenous bases. Now this structure has some story attached to it, some story related to it. There was a Nobel Prize given to 3 people, James Watson, Crick, and Wilkins. Okay, so 3 individuals who actually, Maurice Wilkins, Watson, and Crick. And when this was actually being worked upon, the attempt actually to discover the structure of the DNA, there was a woman, Rosalind Franklin, who was also working upon it. And now, all of a sudden, she was a physicist who was actually trying to find out the structure of the DNA, and she was using a method called as X-ray diffraction. Okay, so X-ray diffraction में क्या होता है कि that certain electrons are bombarded and basically उस किसी के crystal structures की फोटो ली जाती है जिससे आपको उसके structure के बारे में थोड़ा सा पता चल जाएगा. Now, she actually was transferred to University of Cambridge, and she was working in the same lab in which Maurice Wilkins was working. And when she didn't knew that Maurice Wilkins was also working on the project of finding the structure of the DNA. All of a sudden, she got to know that this person is also working upon finding the structure of the DNA, and plus Maurice Wilkins was very much senior to him, so senior to her. उसमें क्या हुआ कि that one day she took a photograph which is very famously called as the photograph number 51, and she took that photograph and went to Wilkins and showed him that photograph. कि देख भाई मैंने discover कर लिया है DNA का structure. And Maurice Wilkins took that photograph and went to Crick and Watson and gave them the photograph. 2 weeks later, or a few weeks later, I don't remember exact number of weeks, that photograph was published in a very famous journal, giving the credit of discovery of the structure of DNA to Crick, Watson, and Wilkins. And the photograph that was used was the one that was produced by Rosalind Franklin. And this was so much a viral discovery that they were awarded the Nobel Prize. In तीनों को Nobel Prize मिला. Rosalind Franklin was not given an acknowledgement in their speech as well. Now, one reason why Rosalind Franklin was not given the Nobel Prize might be that she died, and Nobel Prize is not given posthumously. But we didn't knew that even she had her nomination or not. Okay, उनका uterus cancer से death हो गई थी, and at a very young age, and she could not, she didn't get the award. Okay, or she was, I don't know, or nobody knows actually, even she was the part of the nominated candidates or not. Okay, but nobody actually even paid an acknowledgement कि ये Rosalind Franklin के discovery से पता चला है. Okay, instead, in one of the interview, Watson actually bad-mouthed her, means बहुत ही बुरा बोला and बहुत सारी चीजें बोली. Now, this phenomena is called as Matthews effect. This term was given by R.K. Merton. And what does Matthews effect mean? That in any society, certain social identities will be privileged more than the others. Okay, certain advantage will be given to a particular social identity. So that social identity can be caste, can be class, sex, nationality, or race. And that means the people having superior class, caste, race, nationality, or religion, or whatever, might be privileged over others. And science में ये Matthews effect आपको बहुत जगह देखने को मिलेगा. Once that we have seen here, that is in case of Rosalind Franklin versus Crick, Watson, and Wilkins. The other one, that is what we'll see in Darwin versus Wallace. So they both gave the theory of evolution, but the credit completely goes to one, Darwin. The survival of the fittest idea goes to Darwin only. But Darwin and Wallace had their own share of stories. जिसमें Wallace का credit छीन लिया गया एक तरीके से. So that is what postmodernists also say, that the science is not completely objective. Not all the opinions have equal weightage. Depend करता है वो opinion कहाँ से आ रहा है. And here in this case also, the opinion from the male was given privilege over the opinion by a female. And her share was not duly acknowledged. Okay, so photograph number 51, इसके ऊपर बहुत सारे articles हैं, बहुत सारे internet पे, so nobody actually talks about it, and it remained buried in the book piles of books. मतलब इसके बारे में बहुत ज़्यादा controversy भी नहीं हुई. In fact, the Nobel Prize Committee should definitely thought about this kind of award, और शायद कुछ punishments या कुछ भी होना चाहिए था, at least acknowledgement होनी चाहिए, but this never happened. So that is what postmodernists actually talk about, कि science में भी objectivity नहीं. Not every opinion will be considered with due diligence. Not every opinion will be given due weight. वो opinion depend करता है कि वो कहाँ से आ रहा है. Okay, so this is simply the structure of DNA. Now let's talk about the structure of RNA. So RNA, as I've told you, it's a single-stranded molecule. So simply, sugar molecules attached to phosphate bonds, and in other end of the sugar molecule there will be some nitrogenous bases. But here in RNA, the nitrogenous bases that are used are A, U, G, and C. Thymine is not present. It's uracil that is present. So A, U, G, C, or any kind of order that will be there. Okay. So RNA it's a single stranded, and the nitrogenous bases are not ATGC but AUGC. Okay. Thymine is not present. It's uracil that is there in the RNA. AUGC, single stranded, and it's relatively very short compared to length of a DNA. Okay, not even 1,000 part of it. Okay, बहुत छोटा सा होता है as compared to the whole DNA. RNA is very small. Okay, very small single strand. You'll understand why this RNA is small and what's the purpose of it. It's related to gene and the proteins and all that kind of stuff. But for this, these are the two basic fundamental materials that's going to be with us for the rest of the physical anthropology, at least for 7-8 lectures, till the time we basically begin to deal with the application part of the genetics. Okay, so abhi 5-6 lectures mein we'll be talking about the theoretical aspects, and the theoretical aspects, mind it, they do not ask what is DNA, what is RNA, what is replication, transcription, translation, although it's mentioned in the syllabus. They never have asked a question on it. But iske understanding isliye itni zaruri hai, because if you understand it, rest of the thing will become easy. Okay, but bahut jagah pe you will find it difficult if you do not understand it. Phir lagega ki ratta marna pade, because the logic will not make any sense to you. Okay, so this is the basic idea, DNA, RNA. That's it for today. We'll continue with the processes, replication, transcription, and translation in the next class.